And welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Aikman. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio this morning after a couple days off for the Christmas season. I hope that you enjoyed the music on Christmas. Yesterday I know was a repeat. But today we are live and in studio, receiving so many nice Christmas messages over the Christmas holidays. So thank you so much. Merry Christmas to all of you. It was nice. Here's a comment from a viewer kicking off the show. Good morning, Virtual Wave. Well, hey, good morning. Merry after Christmas wave. Thank you. I tried to watch ABC the year 2024. Just couldn't do it. It featured a political hit job against Trump. We're actually going to talk about the media and the numbers that are now suffering in the news because of Trump's victory, Democrats tuning out, but also people in general, I think, because of the bias. We're going to be talking about that, some scathing looks inside the newsroom, what people inside the newsroom are saying as well. We got a comment from a different viewer. This came in real early this morning. New York State is going to fine companies that it deems contributes to global warming. The result of this idiotic law will be, in addition to the mass exodus of people from New York State, a mass exodus of businesses. Socialists are such shallow thinkers who are deeply, for lack of a better term, stupid. That is the climate super fund bill that we talked about. We're going to dive in depth on that this morning. We talked with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano about this. There was the hopes that maybe she wouldn't sign it because, of course, where are those costs going to go? They're going to affect you. They're going to hit you in the pocketbook. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So thank you for that comment to that viewer. A nice way to segue into that story. I do have some breaking news before that. Also want to remind you that we'll be talking with Willa Vogel in the 7 o'clock hour. She is with the Rockwell Museum, and it's not too late to go vote on the gingerbread houses. So she's going to tell us all about this year's competition, what you need to know in these last few days of the gingerbread houses being on display in the museum. We'll find out how we can participate in that contest. Also, a little bit later on, I'm going to show you a very nice gift that a anonymous viewer, to Frankly Speaking, dropped off yesterday for Christmas. I really appreciate it. I'm going to show you that a little bit later on as well. But first, breaking news overnight. South Korea's opposition-controlled National Assembly has voted to impeach the country's acting leader, Han Duck-soo. The Assembly approved the impeachment motion in a 192-0 vote, early our time, but on Friday in South Korea. Governing party lawmakers boycotted the vote. Han, the number 2 official in South Korea, has been the caretaker leader after President Yoon Suk-yeol was impeached by the Assembly over his short-lived imposition of martial law earlier this month. Han's impeachment further deepens South Korea's political crisis and damages its international image. So we talked about the issuing of martial law. Now the number 2 has been impeached. Okay, so there's your breaking story. Another breaking story, just to keep in mind, we're trying to give you your public service announcement this morning. A U.S. lottery jackpot is projected to soar above $1 billion. And that's still a big deal, even though this is happening more frequently. Today's Mega Millions drawing is worth an estimated $1.15 billion, evoking headlines and likely luring more people to convenience stores with dreams of private spacewalks above the earth, says the Associated Press. It doesn't seem to matter that the nation's top 10 jackpots, not including this one, already have boasted 10-figure payouts. Yes, this is becoming more common. They have set it up in a way to make it more difficult to win. For many of us, something stirs inside when the number ticks one above $99 million. The question lurking is, what happens when $1 billion becomes routine and people don't care about it anymore, said Jonathan Cohen, author of the 2022 book For a Dollar and a Dream, State Lotteries and Modern America. There's no easy round number after $1 billion, but also how much money can one person possibly need? Meanwhile, Mega Millions ticket prices will rise from $2, which they are currently, to $5 in April. The increase will be one of the many changes officials say will result in improved jackpot odds, more frequent giant prizes, and even larger payouts. Cohen notes in his book that lotteries have existed in one form or another for more than 4,000 years. In Rome, emperors and nobles held drawings at dinner parties and awarded prizes that ranged from vases to people who were enslaved. Okay, this is getting a little bit too in the deep. But just as a reminder, Another lottery jackpot. Today's Mega Millions over $1 billion. As a matter of fact, $1.15 billion. Keep that in mind if you are a gambler. If you want to take your chance or at least be able to dream about what you would do with the $1.15 billion. Okay, to that viewer's comment. Yeah, we're going to move quick this morning. We got a lot to cover. Hochul did sign that law that will penalize companies for greenhouse gas emissions. There was hopes that this would not be the case, that she would avoid this one. She did not. Governor Hochul yesterday signed a law that requires companies that are big fossil fuel polluters to help pay to repair damage caused by extreme weather, which is becoming more common because of greenhouse gas emissions, writes the New York Times. The legislation, called the Climate Change Superfund Act, mandates that the companies responsible for the bulk of carbon emissions buildup between 2000 and 2024 pay about $3 billion each year for 25 years. Quote, with nearly every record rainfall, heat wave, and coastal storm, New Yorkers are increasingly burdened with billions of dollars in health, safety, and environmental consequences due to polluters that have historically harmed our environment, Governor Hochul said. The law was modeled on the original Superfund law, which was established in 1980 and requires companies to pay for the cleanup of toxic waste brought by incidents like oil and chemical spills. New Yorkers' new law focuses on pollution produced by the consumption of fossil fuels, which results in the warming, in their opinion, of the atmosphere, causing extreme weather like floods and storms to be more frequent, is what the experts have said. Nothing could be fair than making climate polluters pay, said Lee Wasserman, the director of the Rockefeller Family Fund. The new law, however, will unjustly focus on the energy sector and large companies, said Ken Polanski, vice president of the Business Council. The narrative that the president is the cause of climate change is solely the fuel industry and major businesses. We have all benefited from the use of fossil fuels over the time period covered by this law, when there was really no other broadly available alternatives. The money raised by New York State will go into a fund for restoring and protecting coastal wetlands, upgrading roads and bridges, improving storm water drainage systems, elevating and retrofitting structures, and investing in recovery efforts from natural disasters. Okay, so what we're going to see is that cost being tacked on to your bills, as that viewer said, and I think so rightly said. It will cause many major businesses, especially these fuel companies and things that hire a lot of New Yorkers and already are in the tax rolls to, unfortunately, leave the state. Not anything new. We talk about the mass exodus of people, and really, how many times have we talked about this with not just Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, but Chris Friend, Tom O'Mara? We talked about it with Assemblyman-elect Joe Semplinsky. They continue to make laws in the state that cause businesses to not even consider moving here. That's the one thing that, it's not just the ones that leave, it's the ones that don't even look at New York as a viable option to move their company or their business to. As a matter of fact, we see a lot of businesses leave, but there's an untold number that we'll just never know that would not even consider New York because of its intrusive laws and it's the bureaucracy, and now moves like this, fining companies who use fossil fuel. $3 billion over the next 25 years. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to run too late this morning, as we've covered a lot already. South Korea, the lotto, New York State. We also do have some other New York State issues, not just about the Superfund, the Climate Change Superfund. And next time we have the Assemblyman on, Phil Palmisano, we'll talk about that. This is something that he really focuses in on, energy. You know that. We've talked about it so many times in this program, especially like the electric vehicle mandates for schools, which is going to be interesting because if you've look at it historically already, schools or the voting public is turning down purchasing the electric buses. There's so much cost to them. They're not really efficient. They're talking about really the end of away team sports, things like that, and especially in some of our rural areas where you'll have to almost refuel or get another bus to finish the route. But of course, New York State implementing that and then saying, but we in New York State don't have to do it as early as the schools do. But again, at the end of the day, you have a say in the school budgets. That's how this works. So what happens, and this is a question that I don't think anybody quite has the answer to yet, when that mandate does come through and it's the last day, so to speak, where you must have all electric vehicles, when you go to vote for that school budget, first of all, it is going to be shocking to you. School budgets are already growing leaps and bounds, it seems like, every year. This would be an example of it will be shocking to you because of the cost. What if you turn it down? What if you say no? Then what? I think that's a fair question, a question that not a lot of people, no one that I could tell has the answer to quite yet. Here's an interesting comment from a viewer. Regarding the fossil fuel law, say goodbye to Corning Glass, to Corning Inc. Well, that's an interesting point. If they're going to be fined, what keeps a business here in New York State? That's a fair question. Corning is one that we could point to because that's where we're based out of. So I understand what you're saying. But that's a very good point. And what would make a company stay here when they see costs like this? Because even if they do put it onto the consumer are going to turn on some of these businesses. All for Governor Hochul to have that photo of her signing and looking as if she's doing more than anyone else for climate and trying to get that attention. Very typical New York. We got some other comments coming in, which I'll read when we come back from break. But like I said, I don't want to run too late, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. As I mentioned, coming up a little bit later on from the Rockwell Museum, Willa Vogel will be our guest in the 7 o'clock hour to tell us all about the gingerbread house competition that is wrapping up, I believe, next week. We'll learn all about it. Let's go to some viewer comments, though, and we're going to talk more about Governor Hochul's plan with this super fund. Be prepared for your roads and highway maintenance costs to increase as well because it takes a lot of energy to install or repair roads. LP, natural gas, and diesel fuel are all used in abundance to create a highway. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas. I hope you did too as well. I just heard about Hochul's $75 billion climate bill. It's outrageous, and I didn't think it could be possible that she could damage New York more than she already has. It sickens me. So many are already hurting. Yes, $75 billion. I understand your anger. Unfortunately, and when we talked about it with Assemblyman Palmisano, everybody was kind of wishful thinking because she hadn't signed it right away. There was that wishful thinking, hoping that she wouldn't sign it. But I think in the back of our minds, everybody knew that it just fit her narrative, fit kind of the Democrat policies that she's pushed. It's going to be a very interesting 2026. Now, that's when she's up again for re-election. You already see Richie Torres in her party looking as if he is going to primary her. Then you have on the Republican side at least one Republican who is interested, and that seems to be Representative Mike Lawler. So it's going to be a tight race. A lot of people, especially when it comes to Democrat primary with Richie Torres, who's been pretty level-headed in what he's been saying recently, kind of getting into that campaign mode. It could be a very big challenge for her. Governor Hochul is not very popular. He's not very well liked. She doesn't get the attention that her predecessor did, Andrew Cuomo. That she is not, well, as I've said numerous times, not ready for prime time. You saw that with the speech she gave at the DNC. So it's going to be a tough uphill battle. But back to the bill that she signed into law yesterday. They are calling it, at the New York Post anyway, a controversial law that will force oil, natural gas, and coal companies to fork over a staggering $75 billion to the state for carbon emissions and allegedly contribute to climate change. But critics claim the law is unworkable, likely to be challenged in court, and will only end up costing consumers more. What would you have to do? Not sell fuel in New York State, said Ken Polkowski, vice president of the New York State Business Council, which was opposed to the measure. The New York Climate Superfund, I've heard it sometimes called New York Climate Change Superfund as well, is modeled after a federal law that holds polluters responsible for abandoned toxic waste sites, advocates say. Money extracted from the petro firms over a 24-year period would go toward resiliency projects such as coastal protection and flood migration, as I mentioned. Hochul saying yesterday in her message after signing this into law, this bill would allow the state to recoup $75 billion from major polluters. She said that energy companies are responsible for emitting 1 billion metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions into New York's atmosphere. Quote, for too long, New Yorkers have borne the cost of climate crisis, which is impacting every part of the state. The petro companies should foot the bill, the governor said. An analysis conducted for bill sponsors State Senator Liz Krueger from Manhattan, Democrat, and Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz, a Democrat from the Bronx, showed foreign-owned and American companies together would pay about $3 billion a year over 2.5 decades. The oil giant Saudi Aramco of Saudi Arabia could be slapped with the largest annual assessment of the company, $640 million a year, for emitting 31,269 million tons of greenhouse gases from 2000 to 2020. So we're not going to go through each single company, but the reps for the petro industry said the new law is a declaration of war against firms that provide energy and power to New York at a time when there's already a significant cost to that. Obviously, we talk about it in the cold winters here in New York, and you've seen your gas bills. This legislation is bad public policy that raises significant implementation questions and constitutional concerns. Moreover, its $75 billion price tag will result in unintended consequences and increased costs for households and businesses. The letter, co-signed by the Business Council, the American Petroleum Institute, Northeastern Region, and National Fuel Gas Company, among others. It's a double whammy for businesses and motorists who have to pay the new minimum $9 congestion toll to enter Midtown Manhattan, as well as you've heard. We talked about this a little bit before Christmas, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds on the congestion toll. But a former state energy utility regulator questioned whether the law will withstand a legal challenge. The companies will likely get a friendlier ear in federal court, said ex-State Public Service Commission Chairman John Howard. He also wondered how New York would collect funds from foreign-based firms such as Saudi Aramco or Russia's Lukoil. The new law was championed by climate change activists, including the Sierra Club and Environmental Advocates New York. So Hochul has signed, and it's not really a surprise, but signed a bill that will cause more cost to you at the end of the day, at a time when New Yorkers, as one viewer said, are struggling just to make it, just to get by. Because don't think for a moment these companies are going to pay this out of the kindness of their heart and pay that money up front out of their profits. You may not like that. You may say, why don't they? That's the nature of business. So you will be eating that cost because Governor Hochul wants to look as if she's the one doing the most on the climate. Normally we try to beat California with bad laws like this, and she will take credit, even though at the end of the day it will cause New Yorkers to suffer. Just like, and I go back to it, think of all the businesses and the potential jobs that this could cost. Think of a company saying, I was perhaps considering anyway moving to New York, no longer. So it's a story as old as time here in New York. But there's one, well, I got a couple more New York things. We can continue to talk about this if you want. Hochul's $75 billion climate change super fund bill that she signed into law yesterday. Feel free to weigh in. I see a lot of comments coming in. We'll get to those when we come back from break. I have one or two more New York State issue stories that I think are worth commenting on, passing them along to you. The next is a little bit about this Richie Torres, who is considering, not the worst kept secret, that he's considering running and primarying Governor Hochul. We'll talk about him in just a second. And a thing here about former governor, disgraced former governor, Andrew Cuomo. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street. I'm your host, Frank Acom. A lot of comments coming in regards to Governor Hochul signing that New York law that we've talked about extensively on this program. The Climate Change Super Fund bill charging $75 billion to oil, gas, and coal companies for what they deem their role in climate change. Let's go to some viewer comments here. Sorry, just putting them all together. In regards to the new law that will fine businesses, why don't they go right to the source and drive companies like NYSEG out of New York State so that, like California, we will have to pay even more extreme costs just to cook our food, for example. Well, I think those extreme costs will be bared very quickly if this is to continue to be a law. I mean, it sounds like it could be challenged in the courts. But if this goes into effect, we will be bearing those costs. It will cost us more to cook our food. It will cost us more to, as the one viewer said, drive, etc. Hopefully, this new law is like the proverbial nail in the coffin, and we can say goodbye to Hochul in 2 years. Yes, she is up for re-election in 2026. I think, and we're going to talk about Richie Torres here in a moment, I think Richie Torres is making her concerned, making her nervous. That's why she's signing these kind of extreme laws into effect. Comment from a different viewer. If those government people think that the money is actually coming out of the business's profits, they're sadly mistaken. They're just reaching deeper into each of our pockets. That's a really good way of putting it. Governor Hochul is simply moving the shell ideas around, picking one up and seeing if there's votes underneath it. Yes, this is to play into that far left extreme part of the Democrat base that really does hate fossil fuels. So it's going to be interesting if she thinks this is a winning plan for her going into 2026. Comment from a different viewer. Hochul continues to drive businesses out of New York, as well as citizens who are retired or retiring. She's no better than her predecessor, who was never held accountable. Oh, another good point. Comment from a different viewer. How much more damage can be done in 2 years? Well, unfortunately, you'll see. She is not slowing down, but yes. Hopefully some things at the federal level change, with Trump going in, hopefully. Well, look at what happened when Trump won. Instead of realizing, wait, maybe we could work with Trump to help better New York State. No, Governor Hochul and Letitia James had that press conference basically saying they don't want Trump's help. So she is, Andrew Cuomo at least knew how to play politics. I didn't like him. I think the nursing home decision was one of the most disastrous and tragic decisions ever made by a politician, not just an elected official during COVID, but in general. But he knew how to play politics at the end of the day. And Governor Hochul just does not have that. She is not very charming in any way. You see the speeches, she's just not ready for prime time. But talking about Andrew Cuomo, the Times Union editorial board, to kind of piggyback off what that viewer said, for Andrew Cuomo, lessons from his downfall remain unlearned. Bare-knuckled tactics and a bullying penchant for retribution were among Andrew Cuomo's worst traits during his time as governor. And that was not even a secret. I mean, even Democrats would talk about how vindictive he was, but I'll continue. His recent legal tactics suggest he hasn't changed in the 3 years since resigning from office. Yes, the one accuser dropped the case saying, I can't afford this. He's using taxpayers' dollars. I don't have that complete blank check, and I don't want my name continue to be tarnished. Really bullying a woman that he bullied before, allegedly. It was sad, and he had an endless stream of money. People were shocked to hear that. But yes, we had to pay for his legal defense because he was governor at the time that it happened. So what was it up to? I don't quote me, but wasn't it like $25 million? Something outrageous. But continuing with this piece from the Times Union. Last week, attorneys for Mr. Cuomo filed a legal notice suggesting he may seek a defamation lawsuit against one of the women who have accused the Democrat of sexual harassment. The notice of claim seeks compensatory damages from former aide Charlotte Bennett, who contends that Mr. Cuomo inquired about her sex life and whether she liked older men in conversations they had while he was in public office. Mr. Cuomo's attorneys claim the civil action was prompted by a public statement issued by Ms. Bennett's attorney when voluntarily dismissing a federal lawsuit accusing the former governor of sexual harassment. Ms. Bennett still has an ongoing lawsuit against the state. But the legal move was also prompted, we could presume, by Mr. Cuomo's hope to resurrect his political career as he eyes a run for mayor of New York City. Indeed, his team is mounting an aggressive attack on Ms. Bennett and other women who have accused him of inappropriate behavior. Cuomo's attorneys say they can prove Ms. Bennett's allegations were false because of text messages and videos obtained during the discovery process. Unfortunately for them, a defamation claim would face the hurdle of Mr. Cuomo's own words. While the former governor has consistently denied sexual harassment claims, he has admitted saying things interpreted, quote, as unwanted flirtation and making people feel uncomfortable with conduct that, quote, may have been insensitive or too personal. In his resignation speech, he apologized to 11 accusers cited in a report on sexual harassment allegations following an investigation overseen by the Attorney General, Letitia James. Those expressions of regret could undermine a defamation suit, and they suggest that the threat of one is really about intimidating and silencing Ms. Bennett. Earlier in the month, as New York Post reported, Mr. Cuomo's, here it is, attorneys also saw a gag order that sought to keep Ms. Bennett's lawyers from publicly mentioning the $28 million in taxpayer funds paid to defend the former governor and his associates. And that's why I try to mention it as much as possible. He wanted to silence Ms. Bennett's lawyers because he realizes the optics on that. People don't like having to pay for his legal defense, especially to the tune of $28 million. But you are paying for that as a taxpayer in New York. Certainly, Mr. Cuomo was within his rights to defend himself against sexual harassment claims, says the Times Union. But remember that Ms. James' report wasn't damning only because of the sexual harassment allegations it contained. The report and a subsequent assembly investigation also detailed the former governor's abusive behavior and his administration's attempt to discredit, embarrass, and slime Lindsey Boland, another accuser. The threatened defamation suit is more of the same, and the continuation shows that Mr. Cuomo has not learned the lessons presented by his stunning downfall. It suggests he has not moved on from tactics that led the editorial board, the Times Union editorial board, to declare him unfit for office and to call for his resignation based on his administration's stonewalling and deception about COVID-19 deaths of nursing home residents. The voters of New York City, beware and look elsewhere. Yes, it is at least considered that he is thinking of running for New York City mayor. He does not like that it got out that he used taxpayer funds, $28 million in taxpayer funds, to pay for his legal defense, causing, because of that blank check, the New York State pocketbook, Ms. Bennett dropped her case because she could no longer afford it. There's also, I have time. And then we're going to get away from New York for just a moment, but feel free to keep those comments coming in. Got so many great comments. We mentioned Bronx Representative Richie Torres. So he is considering running for governor, primarying Kathy Hochul. Well, the New York Post editorial board said he got it 100% right when he slammed progressives for their perversion of compassion and allowing vagrants to haunt the transit hubs and the streets, particularly those who are mentally ill and in need of help. They make life miserable and dangerous for everyone, including themselves. Progressives think they're being kind, considerate, compassionate to these troubled people. Civil libertarians think they're protecting their freedoms. Many of them truly believe they're doing the moral thing by letting these people fester. They're horribly wrong. It's not compassionate to let someone sleep on the floor of Penn Station or permit violent ones to attack innocent people. It's not compassion to let druggies shoot up and pass out on the streets. It's not compassionate to leave a woman who appeared to have a walker and is thought to have been homeless, defenseless on an F train while a psycho fatally lights her on fire, as a suspected illegal drug-addled homeless Guatemalan immigrant did on Sunday morning. You've heard that tragic story, that sick, despicable story, and many have went and pointed to, well, people are scared to step in or to do anything. They said there was an innocent bystander on that train that just watched it all go down. But look at the lawsuit against, I always forget his name, Penny, right? Daniel Penny? Yeah, I think that's right. I don't know why yes, Daniel Penny. Look at his punishment for stepping in, and of course, at the end of the day, he was found not guilty, but at the same time, you've got to recall that cost a lot of money. There's a lot of smears against his name, so people aren't willing to take the chance to defend their fellow citizens, but I'll continue. The attack shocked the entire nation. Need more? How about shouting maniac who stabbed a strap hanger watching Netflix in an unprovoked attack on board a Brooklyn train? Just how many of these such incidents will it take for state lawmakers to ditch their perverse compassion, get some real help for these people, whether they want it or not, and keep violent ones away from innocent New Yorkers? Well, it goes back to just like with bail reform. It seems as if they coddle the criminals and tie the hands of law enforcement every opportunity they get. Do they really want to leave it to the Daniel Pennies to deal with more Jordan Neely's? Last week, the Post saw firsthand the uphill battle faced by the city's late-night outreach teams trying to remove troubled vagrants wandering the 34th Street Herald Square Station's underground wasteland. Of 96 individuals encountered, many of them struggle with serious mental health issues. Only 16 agreed to go to a shelter or be hospitalized. Why were 80 allowed to refuse assistance when they obviously needed it? The answer in a nutshell, Albany lets them refuse. We have the tools to stop the problem, said Representative Torres. What is lacking is the political will. Blame for the city's inability to take into custody ill-clothed, unhoused, ranting vagrants who are clearly dangerous to themselves and or others falls squarely on ideologues and bought-off lawmakers in Albany who oppose taking action or fear political backlash from far-left radicals. Nor does Governor Hochul come to the rescue. Her office now says she's working on a plan that will help make it possible for doctors to keep people in psychiatric care longer so they don't end up back on the street. And State Office of Mental Health published new regulations requiring comprehensive outpatient discharge plans so individuals committed for mental health don't just cycle through the system over and over again. But how long before that goes into effect? And will it be enough to fully address this widespread, horrific problem? Let's be blunt. Albany must radically shift its mindset and give the city greater authority to remove individuals who are unable to meet basic needs for food, clothing, and medical care, or who otherwise represent threats. Once taken off the streets and placed into appropriate care facilities, clinicians can better assess their needs. The criteria for involuntary commitment must be broadened because sufferers of serious mental illness lack awareness of their mental disease or their ability to do what's in their own best interest. A sign of hope, a promising new bill, the Supportive Intervention Act, drafted by City Hall aide Brian Stetton, who authored Kendra's law, that calls for common sense changes to state mental health laws that prevent the city from helping those who cannot understand they need help. The SIA would define dangers to self to include psychiatric as well as physical risk of harm. True compassion demands real action to prevent the next tragedy. Our political leaders clearly have the tools to care for those who need help and to keep New Yorkers safe. It's time for them to develop the will. I thought that was a really important message, and Richie Torres being kind of on the forefront on that. Now you may say he's doing it because he's running for governor. Whatever the case may be, there's a real mental health crisis in the state, something we've talked about a lot in the past, especially with Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. But it's obviously something that needs to be done. I got distracted by the waves. We got to go start to the waves this morning. Let's take a short break. Running just a little bit late. Got some comments coming in. We'll read those when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. This morning we've been talking about New York State, specifically the law that will charge $75 billion to oil, gas, and coal companies for climate change. Governor Hochul signed that yesterday. Some comments from viewers. How many more New York businesses will have to shutter their doors? They will be raising their costs, and consumers just can't afford to pay more at a time when they are already struggling. Comment from a different viewer. Over 158 major businesses have left New York. Over $1 trillion in assets, and numerous small businesses have either left or closed. Yeah, and you can't, and there's no way to really take this number in, but think of how many businesses we lose that never even considered moving to New York. Not even on their radar. We've heard from business leaders in the past saying that New York is not even on anybody's short list when it comes to businesses moving to New York. It's just too much rules and regulations, too much cost. And to the other viewer's comment, these costs, this $75 billion bill essentially that Governor Hochul is issuing to these companies, that will just be passed on to consumers. You may not like it, but businesses don't dip into their profits just to pay Governor Hochul and make it a big win-win. No, it'll be costs to you and me. Hey, you know what's really interesting? Oh, well, maybe, I don't know if you'll find this interesting. I found it very interesting. Do you remember the name Marianne Williamson? She ran for president back in 2020, I believe it was. Maybe it was, I think it was 2020, maybe 2016. She's a Democrat. She was a little bit different. Wasn't she like some type of spiritual leader or some type of author? But anyway, she announced her bid to chair the Democratic National Committee, saying she will, quote, work to reinvent the party from the inside out. Wow, interesting. This year's election of a DNC chair feels different than in past years. Before now, the party has faced defeats, to be sure, but our playbook still basically worked. The waters were turbulent at times, but our ship was steady. This year, the party faces a more critical problem than we have ever faced before. The MAGA phenomenon now challenges the very way that politics are done in America, and the traditional toolkit of party organization will not be enough to meet the moment. Asserting that Democrats need to recognize and understand President-elect Donald Trump's appeal, Williamson said the typical strategies of data analysis, fundraising, field organizing, and beefed-up technology will not be enough to prepare the way for a Democratic victory. Quote, "That's why I have decided to run for DNC chair this year," she stated, citing her experience running for president in 2020. Okay, there you go. And 2024. Oh, I didn't realize she ran this go around too. She then linked to her manifesto for a renewed Democratic Party published on December 16th. So this was published a little while ago, which reflected on the mistakes the DNC made that cost them the November election. This is what she had to say. In essence, the Democrat Party has lost its spiritual connection with the American people. Many who used to trust the Democratic Party now feel cynical about it, and often for understandable reasons. The party has squandered its moral authority. Its processes and policies have been corrupted by corporate influence. It has become increasingly disconnected from the values, particularly economic values, that have always been central to the party's identity, resulting in a mass exodus of the working people of the United States away from it. This was a huge mistake and a tragic failure. Republicans will be ready on day one. As DNC chair, I'll make sure that we are ready to take them on. It's also garnered bids, if you're curious. So Marianne Williamson announcing her bid for DNC chair. Also, James Scoffus, Minnesota Democratic Party Chair Ken Martin, Wisconsin Democrat Party Chair Ben Wickler, former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, and former Homeland Security official Nate Snyder. All right, that was just an update. It kind of threw me off seeing her name back in the news. We've got some more, kind of to Marianne Williamson's point, some of the mistakes, if you will, the Democrats made in this election. And now I think it's why so many people have been driven away from the mainstream media. They're getting very concerned, especially and I know you can't really call MSNBC mainstream media, but their numbers tanking, causing them to reassess contracts with different quote unquote stars. They're getting scared. The mainstream media is getting scared. Whether or not they learned their lesson, that's a good question. That seems to be a trend on today's program. People that didn't learn their lesson, like Governor Cuomo, Marianne Williamson, suggesting that the DNC may not have learned their lesson. Well, we're going to talk about the media here when we come back. And also, if we have an opportunity, the New York Post puts together weekly This Week in Whoppers, and it's about maybe various lies media outlets have told or politicians will tell. But this morning, late yesterday, they published the year in Whoppers. And I thought maybe we'd go through a couple of those just for fun to kind of tie it in with the media discussion. Keep those comments coming in. Great conversations this morning. As I said, Willa Vogel will be our guest. She's with the Rockwell Museum. She's going to be joining us in the 7 o'clock hour to tell us about the Gingerbread House Cookout. It's not really cook-off. It's competition. So we'll talk about that in the 7 o'clock hour. Also, we'll be reading more of your comments. And I mentioned early on, anonymous, frankly speaking viewer dropped off a very thoughtful and nice Christmas gift. I will show that to you in the 7 o'clock hour as well. But stay with us. We got to take this short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Franco. Hey, good morning. Would you happen to know offhand how or if a citizen of New York State can impeach a sitting governor? So that's not how it works. It's really, to keep in mind, only one of New York's, I think, 57 governors has been impeached. So it's not an easy process. Basically what it requires, and I looked this up really quickly before we came back on the air, the impeachment now requires a majority vote of the total of members of the assembly. As you know, that is controlled by Democrats, so I don't see that move being done against Hochul. And a conviction requires a 2/3 majority of something that's called the impeachment court. So again, it's an uphill battle, but I understand your comment, and I thank you. All right, let's take a look at some of this year's in Whoppers from the New York Post. Some of them will make you think back to the election like this. Countless media and leftists throughout the year said, quote, Biden's sharp as a tack. President Biden himself proved that beyond false during his debate with Donald Trump. Turns out he was so sharp that his own party forced him to quit the race. Another whopper, she wasn't the border czar. That's ABC's John Carl back in August. Funny, just a year earlier, Carl was explaining that Biden put Kamala Harris in, quote, playing a critical role in terms of trying to stop the flow of migrants across the border. How about this one? Just a little bit of blast because we are running late, and I thought this would be a good way to do a small little segment here. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre back in August saying, we've seen grocery prices coming down over the past year or more. If Jean-Pierre saw prices falling, she must have been standing on her head because they were actually going up faster than in decades. But remember, they tried to, and that was a tough one with inflation because, you obviously experience it, but they were still trying to tell you, never mind what you're experiencing, believe us. But I continue. President Biden at the Democratic convention, those pro-Hamas protesters down the street, they have a point. No, they do not. That was another amazing comment made by the President of the United States. Oh, this was a bad one. This is from Governor Hochul back in May. Do you remember this one? We have young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word computer is. As the Post's Adam Coleman noted at the time, this wasn't a gaffe, but a window into the mindset of many mainstream elitist Democrats, even if the governor later took back her idiotic slur. Politico back in August, again, if you're just joining us, a year in Whoppers, according to the New York Post. Politico wrote back in August, Kamala Harris is defying the laws of the political universe. Now, the November results showed she wasn't so much defying political reality as being shielded by reality-denying media. Yes, I mean, let's think about it. You would have thought, I got duped, that it was going to be a very close race. Of course, at the end of the day, it was a landslide victory for Donald Trump and Republicans. And yet, right up until the end, for instance, that Iowa poll. Continuing, Pennsylvania Democrat County Commissioner Diane Ellis Margelli said precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country. People violate laws anytime they want. Democrats scream about democracy, but when a Republican, Dave McCormick, narrowly beat Pennsylvania Democrat Bob Casey for that Senate seat, Dems like Ellis changed their tune about threats to democracy. They wanted to change the rules. They wanted to steal the election. Another whopper from the year. We have been enforcing the law from day one. That's DHS Secretary Mayorkas in May. Though November results are clear proof that Mayorkas' bald-faced lies about border enforcement couldn't fool all the people all the time. How about this? Jennifer Rubin on November 19th, writing for the Washington Post, saying Republicans want to kill your kids. Rather than accept the November results, Trump haters like Rubin doubled down, resorting to crass, hyperbolic fear-mongering, and a desperate bid to block the incoming president's agenda. Number 10, allowing Trump to hold an event at Madison Square Garden is equivalent to the infamous Nazis rally at Madison Square Garden on February 20th, 1939. That's State Senator Brad Holman Siegel in a tweet back in October. The radical progressive actually demanded Madison Square Garden cancel the Trump event. Ironically, it's Holman Siegel's call to suppress his opponent that's really reminiscent of Hitler's Germany. Number 11, Governor Hochul, just as of Sunday, saying, I took action to make our subways safer. Now crime is going down and ridership is going up. On the very day a suspected illegal immigrant fatally torches a woman on the F train, the governor opts to brag of her successful crackdown on subway crime. Talk about out of touch. We got just a few more. Back in December, this is December 18th, President Biden said, we have a real contrast to be made. What I did in 4 years and what's going to happen in the next 4 years. For once, the New York Post says we agree. Biden and company botched everything they touched, from the border to the economy to foreign affairs. No way Trump or any president can do so much damage. Vice President Kamala Harris on December 17th saying, I ask you to remember the context in which you exist. Harris's mindless word salads played a big role in her defeat, but that's not stopping her from making similar ones to this day. Boy, did America dodge a bullet. And finally, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee saying back on April 9th, a full moon is made up of mostly of gases. Huh? Now everyone knows the moon is made of cheese. I thought that was fun from the New York Post, looking back at some of that coverage, because that ties into what we're going to say about the media. Let's face it, Americans are tuning out all political news. Not in this case. We're watching, frankly speaking. But in most instances, like MSNBC and elsewhere, seeing a huge drop. We're going to talk about that when we come back. We can talk more about Governor Hochul signing that climate change Superfund bill into effect, charging $75 billion to oil, gas, and coal companies. Now, there will be legal battles with this, but at the end of the day, as of right now, it is a law. So we can talk more about that if you'd like, but stay with us. We've got to take a short break. This is, frankly speaking, on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Give them a call today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, having a blast with everybody and all the great comments. Now, Americans are tuning out of political news, according to an Associated Press NORC poll. Television ratings, and now a new poll, clearly illustrate the phenomenon. About 2/3 of American adults say they have recently felt the need to limit media consumption about politics and government because of overload, according to the survey from the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. Smaller percentages of Americans are limiting their intake of news about overseas conflicts, the economy, or climate change, the poll says. Politics stands out. Election news on CNN and MSNBC was taking up too much of this person's Sam Guide, who they interviewed. This is coming from the AP News. Said the 47-year-old electrician from Lincoln, Nebraska, quote, "The last thing I want to watch right now is this." The poll conducted in early December found that about 7 in 10 Democrats say they are stepping back from political news. The percentage isn't as high for Republicans, who have reason to celebrate Trump's victory. Still, about 6 in 10 Republicans say they felt the need to take some time off as well. And the share for independents is similar. The difference are far starker for the TV networks that have been consumed by political news. After election night, through December 13th, the primetime viewership of MSNBC was an average of 620,000, which is down 54% from the pre-election audience this year. The Nielsen company said for the same time comparison, CNN's average of 405,000 viewers was down 45%. Now at Fox News, the post-election coverage of 2.68 million views is up actually 13%. Since the election, 72% of the people watching one of those 3 cable networks in the evening were watching Fox News, compared to 53% prior to Election Day. So interesting. But do they read into this? Do they start to realize their bias has driven people away, especially when we saw the overwhelming landslide that Trump won when it comes to election? That's the question I'll ask you. Have you tuned out? Not on Frankly Speaking, of course, but elsewhere. I'll ask you that question as well, but we got to take a break. Hour number 1 is in the books. We got hour number 2 coming up in mere moments. We'll be joined by Willa Vogel from the Rockwell Museum. She'll tell us all, as they said, let's get ready to crumble. It's the Gingerbread Invitational through December the 31st. So we'll hear all about that in the next hour. We got to wrap up hour number 1. So stay with us. Hour number 2, mere moments away. We will be right back. It's hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We were talking about Americans tuning out of political news. What the polls are showing: 7 in 10 Democrats take a break from political news after Trump's landslide win. America's trust in the establishment media to report current events, quote, fully, accurately, and fairly, plummeted to a record low in 2024. That's according to a poll released back in October by Gallup. The AP reported its survey findings and noted Democrats' declining appetite for news following Trump's sweeping victory. So again, I'm not going to go through the numbers because I know that gets a little bit wonky. People are mentally exhausted, said Democrat Ziad Anula of San Diego. Everyone knows what is coming, and we're just taking some time off. It's kind of their own fault that I'm not watching. I felt they spent all this time talking about the election. They made it so much of their focus that when the main event ends, why would people want to keep watching? That's a very good point. The poll sampled 1,251 Americans from December 5th through the 9th. Okay. Now on CNN, journalists offer a brutal assessment of why their network is failing. This coming from the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. Now, many of these reporters spoke on the condition of anonymity, but it's still worth noting. Insiders claim a decision to hold a town hall with the president-elect back in May of 2024 upset staff and viewers, as did the decision to not fact-check Trump during his debate earlier this year. So what CNN has learned from their ratings plummeting is that they got to be more biased. So again, not learning their lesson, which seems to be the theme of today's program. They believe that they should have never held a town hall with a man who is now president-elect of the United States, because it upset some of the staffers. Oh, and they didn't fact check and ruin the debate, which is this propensity that these media outlets have for the fact checking that becomes so, well, it makes the interview almost difficult to watch. And of course, it's one-sided, as we saw from the ABC debate, that they admitted that they just practiced fact-checking Trump and not Harris. And of course, there's numerous times where they could have fact-checked Harris on basic stuff like October or Project, what do they call it? Project 2025. I think a lot of that could be explained by the viewers making a decision. They just don't like what we're doing, the journalist said. The viewers are pretty smart. This coming from a journalist at CNN. And I don't want to go through all the Nielsen ratings. You don't need to know all that. But you could tell they're scared. CNN journalists are concerned the network is losing viewers because of its friendlier approach to Donald Trump. Can you imagine that? They think that they're being too friendly to Donald Trump at CNN. The way CNN covered Donald Trump during the election has reportedly turned off viewers, especially following the decision not to fact-check him during a town hall earlier this year. Since Trump's presidential win, CNN's primetime viewership has slumped by 52%. The network is also navigating several changes in leadership in the last few years. I'm not going to go through all the people that have quit or whatever, resigned. They just think that they've been too nice. CNN believes they were too nice to Trump, and that's why people tuned out after the election. That seems more like you would be tuning out during the election. The network has now launched a $4 subscription service for online content, although this has come much later than many of its competitors. I think that was only a sustainable model for any big distributed content company is to have a subscription, Chris Cillizza said. What's hard for me is, what is CNN known for? CNN is known for breaking news. People turn it on when something big happens. And I think that's a really good brand journalistically, but I just don't know how you can make money off of it. TV also remains where outlets make their money, so ratings are essentially to secure jobs. Ratings control everything, said a former senior producer. It controls the money, it controls the influence, and it's huge a morale issue. You can worry about the future all you want. Right now, TV is where the money is and where the reputation is. So CNN, even though they spoke on the condition of anonymity, the journalists believe that they have just been too easy on Donald Trump, and that's why their ratings are plummeting. Now, how does that make sense? Because Fox is a more friendly outlet for Trump, and their ratings increased. They're also taking a look at the kind of the meltdowns, and this is the time of year, folks. Some of these stories are kind of like the year-end recap. But despite focusing their sharpest political jokes on Donald Trump, especially in the lead up to Election Day, prominent network comedy shows did not derail Trump's victory, and they're taking a look at the prominent shows. Look, Stephen Colbert got that interview with Kamala Harris. Was that helpful for Kamala Harris, or was she just speaking to her own audience? We had that conversation at the time. Of course it was the same when she went on The View. Those weren't people she needed to reach out to. But that was another failure in her campaign. But late night hosts Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, and others, along with the usual anti-Trump suspects at NBC's Saturday Night Live, were unsuccessful in using their platform to sway voters. And that's why people have started to talk about the importance of kind of the new media, like podcasts. We kind of questioned them at first, but then when you saw the numbers of how many people watch Joe Rogan's show, something like 72 million or 78 million watching that interview with Trump. But I'll continue. This barrage of anti-Trump humor was so frustrating for these comedians after Election Day that some resorted to cursing and even shedding tears on air on a comedy late night show. No wonder Greg Gutfeld's program Gutfeld is doing so well, beating out very often the mainstream, the network late night hosts. As they had done for the entirety of Trump's almost decade-long political career, the mainstream late-night comics went all in on pro-democratic and anti-Trump humor. And it gets very old. It's very cliche and trite at this point, what they've been saying, but we bring you those quotes very often. According to a recent study from the media watchdog group, Media Research Center, nearly all the political jokes told on each of the 5 major TV late-night shows at the height of the campaign were anti-Trump. The study, published in October, found that out of the 1,463 jokes about both Trump and Harris on those 5 shows, the jokes were targeted at Donald Trump at a rate of 40-1, almost 98% to 2%. Even some of the rare anti-democratic jokes appeared to be softened by hosts. Despite when President Biden was at the party's nominee, Seth Meyers tempered a joke about Biden's age with a disclaimer about Trump's criminality. So, no, again, today's theme, not learning lessons. And they go through, and this was actually on Fox News. You see, them actually crying, Jimmy Kimmel and others. They don't realize that there's a lot of people that don't want to be lectured by the Jimmy Kimmels of the world. How many different things Trump's victory is terrible for? The ABC host became emotional and started crying. Myers told his viewers a day after Trump's win that something in his brain broke a little bit last night. Okay. The Daily Show correspondent, Ronnie Chang, told Comedy Central viewers that any of them are dual citizens that need to travel to the other country because of America's turn towards fascism. Those are the kind of things that pass as late night humor. I'm sure when they regroup, they'll just go double down, triple down on the anti-Trump humor. On MSNBC, Juanita Tolliver said on the program Deadline yesterday that President-elect Donald Trump and his supporters chose to reject reality on a regular basis. So this is the same kind of mindset where you're deplorable, you're a clinger, you're garbage if you're a Trump supporter. And they don't realize this is why people are tuning out. Host Alicia Mendez said, if this is strategy, and the strategy is in order to be the hero, there has to be a villain. He hasn't even settled on who the villain is. Then it would mean current President Joe Biden is somehow a villain. Former President Barack Obama is a villain. Justin Trudeau is a villain. The Chinese soldiers who are lovingly but illegally in charge of the Panama Canal, I suppose those are villains too. This is not what we expect with presidential leadership. This is the suggestion of policy, an imperial presidency. Tolliver said, I want to emphasize that point about imperialism because Donald Trump doesn't want to be a president. He said on stage on the campaign, I want to be a dictator on day one, and this mirrors authoritarian behavior. Now, we know he did not say that. We know that they're lying to their audience. Which, let's be real, is something perpetrated that the people Donald Trump looks to for examples, including one Vladimir Putin, right? It's eerie to see it play out like this. I was quite depressed because what I realized in reading it, there is no value in telling Trump or his supporters that none of this is true. None of this is founded in reality or facts. Yes, you should learn the difference between a pardon and a commutation. None of these seem to matter because they choose to reject reality on a regular basis. All right, we got to take a short break. Boy, this hour number one's going quick. We're going to talk to Willa Vogel from the Rockwell Museum. That's coming up in just a little bit. That'll be after this next segment. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security and Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. There's been quite a few reports on Chuck Schumer, and he reveals kind of his plan for Democrats to block what is being called the MAGA revolution. The Democrats are holding on to one last hope after a disastrous election in which they lost control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. For the past 4 years, President Joe Biden, Schumer, and his colleagues on the Senate Judiciary Committee have been quietly stacking the federal judiciary with liberal-minded judges, knowing they could one day provide a crucial bulwark against a resurgent Trump. Just before Christmas, they achieved their goal of pushing through a record 235 judicial nominees, more confirmations in a single administration than anyone since Jimmy Carter. How appropriate. That total includes 150 women judges, the most under any president. With less than a month to go before Trump can begin putting his MAGA policies into action, Biden and Schumer see the batch of new judges as their best and perhaps their only chance of preserving any kind of legacy from the last 4 years. Now, what would that legacy be? I mean, to point to that one piece that we had earlier, the legacy is really that of failure. But I don't know exactly what Trump will do, but I can tell you this. The judiciary will be one of our strongest, if not our strongest, barriers against what he does, Schumer told Politico. They're going to come after everything, he said of the Trump administration. They have so many different parts of MAGA. The people who are anti-women's rights, the people who are anti-environment, the people who are anti-working people rights and union rights, the people who are anti the consumer. They're going to use the judiciary in every way they can. Do you think, I talk about anti-consumer, wouldn't Hochul's bill that she signed into law going after these companies, what that means to you and I, the consumer, because the cost will fall back on us. Couldn't that be called anti-consumer? And do you know, I know there's a lot of Republicans in this audience. Do you know any Republican that's ever said they are anti-environment? And this idea, he sounds like Governor Hochul with this anti-women's rights. Remember, Governor Hochul saying you're anti-American and anti-woman if you vote Republican. So this kind of fear-mongering and name-calling is what it essentially boils down to, and this is Chuck Schumer if you're just joining us. The Democrats didn't go the traditional route of picking prosecutors and lawyers from fancy firms, but chose people from all walks of life. Civil rights lawyers, voting rights experts, teachers, mentors, union representatives, scholars, to, quote, resemble America, Schumer boasted. Schumer said they tried to get as many judges confirmed as possible because we knew that Trump had loaded up the bench with a lot of MAGA judges, and achieving balance was important, and the more, the better. It's time when there's more legislative gridlock and there's an attempt to use the judiciary to actually legislate, having judges that are not MAGA judges, they are not extreme judges, is more important than it's ever been. Yeah, not extreme judges. Interesting. He gets to decide what extreme is. Schumer saw the writing on the wall in the last couple of years and said, we also saw that the hard right was gearing up to use the bench in case after case to achieve their goals. It will be a struggle to control rampant Republican Congress fueled by a White House intent on recrimination. But Schumer's hoping his army of judges can hold the fort until he hopes the cavalry arrives in the midterm 2 years away. So bragging about this, getting kind of arrogant to Politico about what his plan is. But it comes as no surprise. After backing Trump, low-income voters hope he doesn't slash their benefits. That was a headline from the Washington Post. They just don't get it. Trump's tariff plan to hit affordable cars the hardest, by Wall Street Journal. Well, anyway, in less than a month, elected Democrats will find themselves with a lot less power in Washington. But Dem leaders have learned one thing from Republicans over the years. It's that sometimes the judiciary can be the best bulwark against the opposing party getting what it wants. I don't know exactly what Trump will do, but I can tell you this. The judiciary will be one of our strongest, if not our most strongest. That is Chuck Schumer. He says the Biden-appointed judges will be a bulwark. That's the word today. Against Trump. How are we doing on time? Good. We knew that getting more judges on the bench would help protect our legislative record. The two did go hand in hand. If you ask me which one was more important, I wouldn't want to pick among my children. Okay. So not really a surprise. What are your thoughts on this? And this is historically, they did this with the Supreme Court when they had a majority. They tried to use the judicial branches to get through what they want, very often unpopular with the voters. So they go through the judiciary, go through various judges. Interesting. Matthew Dowd also getting kind of arrogant with this. Former Bush-Cheney political strategist Matthew Dowd said on MSNBC that President Joe Biden was trying to box President-elect Donald Trump in with his last official actions as president. Matthew's been a busy week for the president, he was asked. We're talking of when they commuted the sentences that came in at the end of the week. But we had many bills signed by the president. There's also the issue of more judges. What do you expect to see in the next 3 weeks with anything with a lasting effect? This is what Matthew Dowd said. I mean, I think what he's trying to do is trying to corner Donald Trump and sort of box him in so he can do, I think, the Biden administration, and the president is trying to prevent Donald Trump from doing as much damage as he possibly could do, which he could do a lot more after becoming president. But I think Joe Biden is trying to box him in on this, specifically speaking specifically to the commuting of sentences, which, of course, Donald Trump doesn't understand the difference between that and a pardon. It comes from the president's Christianity and outlook on the world. I will tell you personally, as a Christian, I'm opposed to the death penalty. Donald Trump is amazed. He's weighing in on the issue in such a way on Christmas. He might as well have quoted Scrooge from Dickens and said, bah, humbug. I think Joe Biden is trying to box Donald Trump in as much as he can. I think giving Joe Biden way too much credit, but I guess now he's back to being the Mount Rushmore president. I don't know, the George Washington, at least if you listen to Matthew Dowd. We've got a couple other things on the Republicans on the election. That kind of year, that time of year, I should say, where the news is a little bit different this morning. We've been talking all morning long about Governor Hochul and that $75 billion charge to oil, gas, and coal companies for climate change, what that will mean for the state, the loss of jobs, the loss of businesses, of course, considering businesses not considering coming in. And I think that speaks to people who wondered if she would ever change the position on fracking and maybe open up the fracking. I think that spells it out pretty clearly, not to expect that even under the Trump administration, that she will fight that tooth and nail. But we got to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking with Willa Vogel. She is with the Rockwell Museum. After that, I'm going to show you this great present Then an anonymous, frankly speaking, viewer dropped off yesterday. I wasn't here, but dropped it off. Wait till you see it. You're going to get a good laugh. I think former Congressman Joe Sempolinski is jealous. I sent him a picture this morning. When he'll see it, I'll let you know what he has to say. But we got to take a break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will be right back. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of that program. And in the studio, we have Willa Vogel. Good morning, Willa.
Hi, good morning.
How's everything going at the Rockwell Museum?
Busy.
As always? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're going to talk about the Gingerbread Invitational, and I'm glad that you could come on the program because, you know, Christmas is over and people think everything Christmas related is over. Mm-hmm. So this holiday Gingerbread Invitational is not over. Tell us how people can have the opportunity to still see all these amazing creations.
Yeah, we really recommend if you got visitors in your house, kids bouncing off the walls, pop into the Rockwell Museum. You can visit and vote for your favorite gingerbread creation. There are 11 in total, which is actually the most we've ever had. Oh. And they're just incredible. The theme this year is paradise.
And I want to talk about that in a second. Do you think there's more people because it is the 10th anniversary?
Could be. Yeah. I think it's one of those things where it just kind of builds momentum over time. I've been working on the Gingerbread Invitational since it started, so it's just been really fun to see it grow. I think the theme was really appealing to people, very easy, approachable. Everyone could picture like their dream day and create it out of gingerbread. So.
Well, that's the thing, because when you think paradise, it could be anything. It's like the individual's paradise. So did people get very creative?
Yeah, I mean, there's classic things like a beach. And, you know, and then... there's people, there's one that I really love that's very imagination-based, like a little girl reading in bed, and she's just surrounded by fairy tale creatures.
Oh, isn't that nice?
There's another one that's like Snow Day. That's just like folks playing.
Which is paradise.
Exactly.
How long does it take? I mean, you don't make one, right, at the Rockwell?
I have never made one.
No. So how long does it take some of these people? I'm sure they tell you.
They get about a month from start to finish.
Okay.
But I guess I don't really know how much time goes into it. We do reimburse them for some of their materials. That's something we've been able to add over the years, is some funds for that.
Here's kind of a weird question. Do they hold up this whole time? Because this has been going the whole month, right?
Mostly they do.
Okay.
Though me and my events manager, Janelle, we've gotten pretty good at gingerbread repair. So they're
okay. So you've never made a gingerbread, but you can repair a gingerbread.
No, but
that's a really niche market that you're in.
There are times where I have to rush to Wegmans specifically to find blue sprinkles, and it's an emergency.
Oh, sure.
Get back here in 10 minutes because the photographer's here to get pictures, and this one's falling apart.
That's
so
fun.
It's kind of fun.
Can you use, like, I think at first when they build them, they have to be edible, right? Everything has to be, but
anything visible is meant to be edible. So if there's anything interior that's not edible, there's no way that we would know.
Okay, but when you're fixing it, can you use crazy glue? Because you're not really.
I don't want to give up our trade secrets.
Okay, no trade secret. That's because you're the only person in the world that may have that as their job title. Gingerbread creation repair person.
Yeah.
How many? So you said 11 people, or it's not just people; it's like groups too.
It's
right?
often teams. So there's like a group from Arnett who created one. There's
Do they go like Arnett related? Is it like hospital related?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they made a really cute, really wonderful little creation of their cancer center garden where folks can recuperate. And then we have a school group that does it every year, an art club from Addison. So
it can be, but individuals for next year can sign up and get a group involved. Is there any cost to enter?
No cost to enter. We actually pay you.
Oh.
We reimburse you for your materials once you get through the approval process.
Yeah.
And then there's I think it's a $250 cash prize for whoever wins the Community Choice Award.
Is there a trophy with that?
Yes. We actually work with a local ceramic artist, Colleen McCall, and she makes a lovely bespoke trophy every year. They're just really stunning.
I'm sure. That's so neat.
Yeah, we really go all in on this.
Well, it sounds it. Well, you've been doing it for 10 years, so you know what brings the people into the seats, right? So how have the crowds been?
Wonderful. I was working during Sparkle, and it was just like almost 1,000 people that came through. Wow. It has become over the last 10 years like a really lovely tradition for folks. They they might pop by the Glass Museum, come into the Rockwell to cast their vote. The art lab is also open, which is just across the street here. Right that's perfect for kids. So we have a lot of gingerbread activities there related to gingerbread paper. Made out of paper, not candy, but.
Can you feel from the crowd where the favorite's headed? where the community choice is probably going to
Yeah,
go.
usually after the first weekend, someone pulls ahead. Though I will say this year, I feel like they're all more evenly matched. There are times where one is just so standout, so professional.
Yeah.
This year, everyone's pretty evenly matched, and the thing I love about it is just like everybody loves it.
Yeah.
Like no matter what. I was working during Sparkle, throngs of people coming through. There was this group of big, I swear they were like motorcycle dudes. They were wearing, they were tattooed. They had leather jackets, and they were in there taking pictures and like, bro, look how cute this one is.
What's a gingerbread house?
Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
So
How big do these get?
we have very
Like
specific size restraints to fit into the museum pedestals. Yeah.
Okay. And you said the theme this year is paradise. How do you come up with your theme each year?
It's often tied to the theme of an exhibition. So we actually have 2 exhibitions right now that had paradise in the title.
Okay.
So we thought, oh, that would be a really fun twist and just make the whole season paradise. So
It is. It is. So is there a cost for people that want to vote?
it's just regular museum admission. So right now that would be half off for local residents. So if your zip code starts with 148, 149, and there's another one that I really should know as the marketing director. If you're local, it's only $6, and kids 17 and under are always free at the museum, and that includes the art lab. So if you come, you can also visit the art lab. It's all included in one ticket.
That's right across the street. That's the
Yes,
art
it
lab?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right behind me.
What do you do with the displays when they're over? Do you give it back to the person? Do they just toss it?
People can, come pick them up if they want, but I will say, I don't know if I should say this, it's one of my favorite days of the year is pitching the gingerbreads into the trash can.
Oh, that's horrible. Do you take pictures?
It's really fun.
Yeah.
I always take a picture. We chuck them into the dumpster if they don't want them, and I wish we could do something else with them, but by the time you take the cases off, honestly, they usually smell pretty bad.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
They're just barely holding up, so it's really fun.
So that's how you
That's a
blow
little
off,
behind the scenes
you
for
blow
you,
off the
Frank.
holiday, like steam and all that stress of the holiday season.
Yep,
and
so
your
it'll
way
be
of dealing
open
with it.
until December 31st.
Okay.
So it's a perfect thing to do if you got, family at home, or just meet up with folks.
Yeah,
It's a
and
good
everybody
thing.
gets one vote. Is that how it works?
Yep, you walk into the museum, check in at the front desk, pay your admission fee, and you'll get your little ballot.
Oh, that's fun.
And you get an I voted sticker.
Do you really?
once you
That's
vote.
a smart idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they're very cute.
What's new in store for the Rockwell? What's coming up in the new year? Anything fun to look out for?
A few things. We have a new executive director starting in January, so I think there's a lot of change on the horizon for the Rockwell. In 2025, also our theme of the year is color. So we're going to do all kinds of really exciting exhibitions. A lot of them are based on the Rockwell collection, things that haven't been out for a while.
Okay.
So in January, we're going to have this lovely exhibit called The Color of Night, Dusk Till Dawn. So it's going to be all objects from the Rockwell collection that focus on night scenes. And I just think it's going to be really neat. Not big blockbuster artist name or anything, but
Right.
I think people will find some treasures in there that
Something
they'll really
different.
like.
And you said that not all the collection is out. Do you get to see it though if you want to? Do you have an insider looking?
I could
You could.
potentially go to our offsite storage, top secret offsite storage location and take a peek. A lot of our collection is online though, so when you're not able to see it in person, you can see it.
And people
in
might
the
not.
museum.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but people might not be aware of your connection with the Smithsonian. How's that been? That's only been a few, 10 years maybe there too?
Yeah,
that
we've
long?
been a Smithsonian affiliate, I think, for 9 years,
Okay.
and it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful stamp of approval on the great work that we're doing, not just with upholding a wonderful art collection of American art, but just all the work that we do in the community. That's really what the Smithsonian looks for as a partner. It means that we can borrow Smithsonian objects. They borrow from us. We have a couple different speakers coming from the Smithsonian this winter and spring, so you can look for our lecture series program listing coming out promptly. I think they might all be online by now.
Okay.
Yeah, so
We're talking about the Rockwell Museum right now, but also specifically the Gingerbread Invitational, and that's through December 31st, 9 a.m. till 5 p.m., so people still have a chance to vote. Now, don't make anybody bias here, but do you have a personal favorite?
I try not to say, but I will say one
Yeah,
thing
you
that
have
I
to say.
always look for is unconventional use of materials. Always
Oh, I
gets
didn't
my
think about
vote.
that
Where
when
I'm
it's-
like, oh, I've never seen someone make bricks out of that before, and
didn't
it's just
think of
really creative. Because some of them are just like fabulous, wonderful, like they look like they're out of a magazine.
Yeah.
And then I just like the ones that have like a really kooky use of material or just like a funny story.
And it all has to be edible on the outside. That's pretty, that's, people are so creative. I don't even know how they do it.
I know. One day I'm gonna make one. What I've always wanted to make was the old Donna's. The one that was across the street here with the green facade.
Yeah, yeah.
And like have it filled with Pyrex and Corelle ware. I think that would be really
That's a brilliant
cute.
idea.
But you know, maybe when I retire.
Yeah.
I don't know if people have time for this.
No, I don't. I know, because like you said, I mean, there is no time limit, other than that month. I would have to spend 8 hours a day to come up with, and that'd be practice, a lot of practice, throwing out a lot of gingerbread, don't you think?
I think that's where it comes in handy to be part of a team, because everyone, I've done big art projects before, not gingerbread, but it always helps to have someone with a vision, someone who's really good at making it structurally sound, someone that can do details. So having a team, I think, is really.
I could be the foreman and just yell at people.
You could try it.
I think that would.
I don't know if I'd sign up.
No.
For that.
So I'm not on the Donna team. And you're not going to let me help?
I don't know.
All right.
We'll talk when we're both retired.
We're both retired. All right. Well, Willa, thanks so much. Where can people find out more about the Rockwell and the Gingerbread Invitational?
I would recommend going to rockwellmuseum.org. And that is where you can find information about the Gingerbread Invitational. Also on our Facebook page, there's tons of photos of them. Okay. If you don't have a chance to get in, you can at least take a peek online.
Or if you want to go informed.
Says when
if
you
vote,
want to
you should
take
be
a peek
informed.
before you go, make sure you know what you're getting into. Yeah. That's right.
Well, thanks so much. Happy holidays.
Likewise.
All right. Well, let's have you on again soon, okay? Mm-hmm. All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Thank you again to Willa Vogel for being on the program this morning to tell us about the Gingerbread Invitational. It's not too late to vote. You have through December 31st, and then they'll announce the winners. I'll keep an eye open for the press release to see who the winners are, but hopefully you can make it out and vote. All right, I've got to mention this. Yesterday, I received from an anonymous, Frankly Speaking, viewer a nice Christmas gift. And I do got to say, I text a picture of it to Joe Semplinsky, former congressman, currently Assemblyman-elect Joe Semplinsky. He's extremely jealous that he does not have one. Look at this. Sleep pig racing. As you may recall, we had members of the Steuben County Fair come in, and that's, of course, one of the highlights of the fair each year. And Joe Semplinsky and I would talk about the fun of grabbing a root beer and watching the exciting racing and the pig races. So thank you very much for that gift. A comment from, I really do, I sent it to Joe and he said it's fantastic and he's jealous, and I knew he would be, so thank you for that very much. All right, comment from a viewer. Chuck Schumer has never held a job and is married to his party. He has never represented his constituents, only himself. And this ties in with what outgoing or retiring Representative Annie Kuster, from a Democrat from New Hampshire, had to say. Talking about these people that stay in office for too long. Some call it the swamp or the deep state. She did an interview with the Globe. As Representative Annie M. Kuster leaves Congress, the New Hampshire Democrat is hoping some of her colleagues might be inspired to do the same, and wishes President Biden had earlier as well. Kuster, who's 68, said her decision to retire was based on many factors, including Donald Trump's approaching return to the presidency, but she hopes it will also encourage Democrats to make room for the younger generations in the halls of power. Now, we've seen Nancy Pelosi fight back against AOC, not giving her, or fighting to get someone else in the position, the higher leadership positions. Kuster said, "I'm trying to set a better example. I think there are colleagues, and some of whom are still very successful and very productive, but others who just stay forever. As for the role in a new Trump-led Washington," she said, "I'm just not the best gladiator for it right now. I have said somewhat factitiously, he tried to kill me once. I'm not available for that again." That meaning she was referencing January 6th. "What we went through on January 6th and his attempt to overthrow government took a toll. That was really hard, and not just personally, but on my ability to work across the aisle. Just in my heart, I reached the conclusion that this would be a very challenging campaign for him," and this meaning Biden, "and to put himself out there for another 4-year term was going to be a struggle." Kuster, who admitted that Biden's team may have worked to conceal his decline. She went on to liken a conversation with Biden after his disastrous debate performance in June to her conversations with her own parents about, their aging and their limitations. So on her way out the door, Chuck Schumer is a prime example of that, being there forever. Now, Biden is to leave the White House with little fanfare, according to The Hill. He's ready to leave, and he's pushing the fanfare aside. Democrats are eager to turn the page on a poor year in which they lost again to President-elect Trump, who has swallowed up much of the spotlight well before he's taken office for a second time. And some Democrats have been very critical of that, saying that there's one thing to be a lame duck. There is another thing to be this lame of a duck, really ceding power to Trump already. And we've seen those meetings that Trump has had with world leaders, etc. Biden, for his part, has embarked on several major foreign trips since the election. He also pardoned his son, is working on reaching a ceasefire deal in Gaza, upping assistance to Ukraine, and working the holiday circuit while delivering speeches in and around Washington. He also made waves just before Christmas by announcing he was commuting the sentences of 37 people serving on federal death row. We talked about that when it was a breaking story. But the president's public presence has hardly registered, while Trump's cascade of announcements from his second cabinet, a network television interview, and his first press conference since winning the election, they take up much of the media atmosphere. That's aside from Trump and his allies injecting themselves into erroneous government funding negotiations at the year's end, in which Biden and the White House were largely silent. The course was instead largely led by House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Republicans said Biden's absence from major moments is par for the course, in addition to his avoiding the press at almost all costs. And that has been a staple of his, really his time in office and before in the campaign. Quote, he's been disappeared for a long time. We saw him go to Africa, didn't take any questions that anybody could see, and was largely shielded from the press. And that was right after he took that trip, right after he had pardoned his son Hunter. So that was one of the reasons why they thought he took the trip, was so that he could avoid these questions. We know he's going to go to Italy. Presumably, media will have the same amount of access, said GOP strategist Doug Hay. Democrats, too, have done little to bolster the leader of their party, instead expressing anticipation for Biden to leave office, even if they don't like who is coming next. There is just such a great level of sort of disappointment on the way the presidency is ending. It's almost like a resignation at this point, said a Democrat lobbyist. Among Democrats, nobody's looking forward to Donald Trump being president, but everybody's ready for the Biden presidency to be done. Now, Jon Favreau, a former Obama speechwriter, said Trump's press conference highlighted a notion that Biden was absent from the public stage, despite the fact that Biden himself was delivering a speech at the Labor Department while Trump was announcing a $100 billion investment from SoftBank. Quote, it was more or less a standard presidential policy announcement. The main difference being Trump isn't president yet. A fact that is getting easier and easier to forget as Joe Biden seems to be disappearing from the public stage as his term comes to an end, Favreau said on Pod Save America podcast. Some Democrats say they are unbothered by Trump stealing the spotlight in the final months, noting that he isn't acting inappropriately and appears more measured than 8 years ago. Others note that Obama stole the media's attention in 2008 when he was first elected, as former President George W. Bush was moving out of the White House. So kind of going into the sunset with very little fanfare, really kind of ceding power to Donald Trump already. Again, that was been something that they've criticized him for. Losing is not fun, and I think you are seeing not fun play out across the Democratic Party spectrum, Zapien said. I would not call it Biden fatigue. It's more of a, well, that stunk. Rest up for the following one feeling. Now, this ties in, and I know some had said this after the election, that it was kind of the end of the Obama era, if you will, when it comes to politics. According to Emma Colton, former President Barack Obama's years of dominating Democrat Party politics may be drawing to a close, as he and party leaders are likely facing a greater reckoning after Democrat losses in the 2024 election. President-elect Trump notched a decisive win, as we know. I think there's going to be big demand for a greater reckoning. The Democratic Politburo, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, and others all participated in the obvious lie that Biden was capable of a second term, and the anti-democratic move to install a wholly untested Vice President Harris, said Democrat strategist Julian Epstein. And in lacking the courage for the past 4 years to stand up to the progressive left, whose policies are far out of touch with most viewers. They failed the test of leadership in this respect. This month, Obama delivered a speech at the 2024 Obama Democracy Forum, which earned him a headline on MSNBC, reading, quote, Obama still doesn't get why Trump won. That's the problem. Obama's characteristic rhetoric virtues were all full on display. He was a constitutional law professor before he was a politician, and he still sounds like one. At the same time, he was a once-in-a-generation talent as a political communicator. He knows how to convey a complex set of ideas in a digestible and appealing way. But there was a massive gaping hole at the center of his speech. He still doesn't understand why his 8 years in power culminated in the rise of Trump. They said the first step to better respond to America's demands for change from the status quo is to stop listening to Barack Obama. Kind of an interesting take on this. And we've heard this right after the election, too, where there's numerous op-eds that said this was the end of the Obama era. The Democrat Party in Harris's campaign has been dragged by some allies, such as Bernie Sanders, for moving away from working-class voters, as we've talked about. Harris's advisors blame everything but themselves for the loss, an op-ed in the Washington Post read this month. The piece took issue with how a handful of Harris campaign staffers joined the left-wing Pod Saved America podcast, which is hosted by former Obama aides, and defended their work on the campaign. David Plow, Jennifer O'Malley Dillon, Stephanie Cutter, and Quentin Folks joined the show, all of whom, except Folks, previously worked for Obama's presidential campaign or his administration. What the four never did is directly admit any major mistakes they made. We should have really pushed Harris to distance herself from President Biden. Maybe we spent too much time in Arizona. We should have had a Palestinian speaker at the Democratic National Convention. There was no blunt statements like that, the op-ed said. While New York Post editorial board declared in a headline following the election, Trump and America bury the Obama doctrine. That's the one that I mentioned on the program after the election. So kind of an interesting piece here from Fox News, a greater reckoning. Do you believe there will be a greater reckoning in the Democrat Party? I don't think so. Today's theme has been not learning your lesson. There seems to be a lot of the same things being done as always. Nancy Pelosi still getting to pick the leadership, things like that. So kind of an interesting take, and something we're hearing more and more, which is the old way of doing politics isn't working with kind of the new Trump era. But we got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning, wrapping up today's edition. We do have to take another short break. Here is an update, kind of a breaking story coming out late last night. The State Department's controversial Global Engagement Center shut down this week after congressional lawmakers nixed reauthorizing the agency and spending legislation to keep the government open. Quote, the Global Engagement Center closed on December 23rd, 2024, read a message on their website. The GEC came under fire from House Republicans after journalist Matt Taibbi uncovered evidence that it pressured U.S. social media platforms early in the COVID-19 pandemic to censor Americans online, purportedly to counter, quote, disinformation, such as theories that the virus leaked out of a laboratory in China. We learned Twitter, Facebook, Google, and other companies developed a formal system for taking in moderation requests from every corner of the government. The FBI, DHS, HHS, DOD, the Global Engagement Center at State, even the CIA, Taibbi said. The Washington Examiner later uncovered a $100,000 grant GEC made to the London-based Global Disinformation Index, a media monitoring nonprofit that would go on to deem 10 outlets, including the New York Post, as purveyors of disinformation. Several Republican lawmakers have argued that the GEC went well beyond its stated mission of proactively addressing foreign adversaries' attempts to undermine U.S. interests using disinformation and propaganda by attempting to censor Americans. This is an entity that is funded to censor conservatives, said Senator Eric Schmidt. We should not be doing any of this stuff. Tying that in, which I just thought was kind of interesting, the New York Post has the full piece up on their website, main story this morning, that spy chiefs silenced researchers and the Defense Department FBI who discovered strong evidence that COVID-19 most likely leaked from a Chinese lab. As a result, their findings were kept out of an August 2021 report to President Biden on the origins of the global pandemic. That report concluded that the virus behind COVID was probably not genetically engineered. After the pandemic erupted in Wuhan, 3 scientists from the Defense Intelligence Agency began trying to figure out exactly where it came from. But they were censored in a way, not reporting their findings to President Joe Biden. Kind of an interesting, just an update. So spy bosses silenced Defense Department FBI scientists from briefing Biden on COVID lab leak evidence. But we got to take another short break, wrap things up for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. We'll go through a couple of quick things our way out the door. I see some more comments coming in. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. let's go through some viewer comments here as we wrap up the program. Just looking at them all coming in. Thank you very much. All right, starting off with Sergeant Dave writes, morning. Frank, Happy New Year. Well, Happy New Year to you and good morning as well. Here's the Democrats' take. Should have, could have, would have. It's as simple as they didn't listen to the people. And that's a good point, Sergeant Dave, that they focused on really out-of-touch issues. We've talked about it extensively, especially these woke policies. I see Elon Musk now urging his supporters not to donate to Wikipedia after it spent $50 million on DEI, calling it Wokepedia. Stop donating to Wokepedia until they restore balance in their editing authority. This is kind of similar. I tie it in with your comment, only because I don't think they have learned the lesson. Well, actually, a different viewer wrote this. I fear that the Dems will not do anything different, but may quite possibly amp it up even more. Well, that, really, if you look at Chuck Schumer and stacking the courts, essentially getting all those judges in that Biden and his people want, or that Chuck Schumer wants, that is one thing that I agree with you, that they haven't changed, and if anything, they will ramp up kind of the lawfare even more if they are able to. Next up, off topic. How did Pelosi get her hip replaced so quickly when us little people have to wait months in many instances? That's a very good point. I don't know if it was an emergency type surgery. Haven't really heard anything more about that. That's a really good point. Oh my goodness, we are almost out of time. Oh, did you see that Trump suggests to Canada that the Canadians should draft Wayne Gretzky to run for prime minister amid Trudeau upheaval? I just left Wayne Gretzky, the great one, as he is known in ice hockey circles. I said, Wayne, why don't you run for prime minister of Canada, soon to be known as the governor of Canada? He's going to keep pushing that. You should win. You would win easily. You wouldn't even have to campaign. Now, he had no interest, but I think the people of Canada should start a draft Wayne Gretzky movement. It'd be so much fun to watch. Now, Shark Tank star Kevin O'Leary says that half of Canadians favor Trump's proposal for Canada to join the United States. How am I doing on time? I got to be mindful of that. Canadian investor and Shark Tank star Kevin O'Leary said Thursday that he wants to help broker a deal with President-elect Donald Trump that would create some sort of economic union between the U.S. and Canada, declaring that at least half of his countrymen would support such a merger. O'Leary's interest in unifying the U.S. and Canada comes after Trump has repeatedly suggested in recent weeks that Canada should become our 51st state. Canadians over the holiday, the last 2 days, have been talking about this, O'Leary said. They want to hear more. Now, he did acknowledge there's obviously a lot of issues that would arise if Canada attempted to join the U.S., but said Trump's interest in the matter could be the beginning of an economic union. Interesting. Now, Canadians ministers head to Florida for talks with the incoming Trump administration. That's according to a report. 2 top Canadian ministers headed to President-elect Trump's home in Florida on Thursday to talk about border security and trade as the incoming president's inauguration day nears. Yes, that's coming up. And I keep asking this question. Is anybody out there going to go to the inauguration coming up on January 20th? But continuing, new finance minister Dominic LeBlanc and foreign minister Melanie Joly will be in Palm Beach. Were in Palm Beach yesterday for the talks. They want to have Trump's incoming border czar talk with Tom Homan after Christmas to discuss Canada's plan to secure the border as part of the bid to avoid sweeping tariffs. The spokesperson said LeBlanc and Joly look forward to building on the discussions that took place when the Prime Minister met with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago last month, as well as a positive call the ministers held with Mr. Tom Homan earlier this year. Speaking of Tom Homan, he says Trump will, almost out of time, will immediately bring back ICE and worksite raids and remain in Mexico border policy. We haven't really worked out the plan for worksite enforcement, Homan told the Washington Post. We know that employers are going to be upset. In addition to protecting American workers from illegal employment, Homan said the incoming Trump administration will reinstate the remain in Mexico policy at the southern border, which Biden ended on his first day in office. We need to show the American people we can do this and not be inhumane about it. We can't lose the faith of the American people. So that is the new border czar, Tom Homan. Now, Mexico is going to open shelters to house over 12,000 of its own citizens deported in Trump's illegal immigrant crackdown. Mexico is gearing to take back its citizens who have been living in the U.S. illegally, and officials are planning to open more than 12,000 beds in shelters across the country to house the new arrivals. That does not sound like that'll be enough beds, but the 25 planned shelters, which will each have the capacity to hold 500 people, will open their doors on President-elect Trump's inauguration day. This is a strategic plan to accommodate exclusively people who got deported after January 20th, who get deported after January 20th. They said it takes Trump's threat of mass deportation seriously. Well, that does it for us today. Boy, we covered everything. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you to Willem Vogel from the Rockwell Museum. The Gingerbread Invitational is now through December 31st, so it's not too late to vote. Go in and see all the beautiful gingerbread houses. Still stay in the Christmas spirit. Thank you again for all the great messages. Wishing me Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Happy New Year. And we'll be back on Monday morning with Frankly Speaking. Only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we will see you Monday, bright and early at 6 a.m. I look forward to it already. Have a great day and a great weekend, everyone.